Hello everybody, today I'm getting on with planting the first batch of my tomatoes. These are my Crimson Crush. I'm putting 8 into this hot box here, and it's the first batch of, I think, 4 batches of tomatoes that I'll be planting at various stages through the next month or so. There's reasons for everything, and we'll go into that in the video. Now, back at the end of February, I sowed the majority of my tomato seeds. I did sow some at the beginning of April as well, but that's a different batch and they'll be coming through a bit later. They were seeds that were sent to me from America, from Audrey, from Real Food Comes Dirty. I'll put the link in the description. Very kindly sent me some seeds that I've never grown before, and they'll probably be going in one of the tunnels around here. I'm not sure where just yet, but for the moment I'm concentrating on the Crimson Crush. These are an outdoor variety, but I grow them inside because the weather can be very changeable up here in Cumbria, northwest Cumbria, and we can have very cold summers. So what I like to do is to get an early start, get the plants in early and get them growing if the weather is safe. Now, I've checked the weather, and for the next 2 weeks all the temperatures are up around the 10 degrees mark as a minimum, so that's day and night for the next 2 weeks, and that's perfect for tomatoes. But as a safeguard and to power the growth of these plants along, I've got this hot box thing. It's got a front, it's outside, and a lid. I'm going to plant 8 plants in here now and then put the lid on, and then they're protected. As soon as the plants touch the roof of the lid, I'll take the lid off, and if necessary, if we get a cold night predicted, I'll fashion something where I can fling some fleece over this. Eventually this whole structure will come off. I'll put canes in and carry on growing them. Now, one of the reasons I want to grow these so early, and this is important and with this variety, is that it's early fruiting. So it's one of the earliest to fruit, and I'm looking for these little fellas down here. These are the side shoots of the plants. Now, it's my belief, and I've done this for years, that side shoots grow better than the actual tomato plant. If I was to plant that, the first truss can be about here. With the side shooted plants, they're much lower to the ground. They seem to be much closer together on the stem, and they seem to grow with a better vigour. Because the time has gone on, by the time these side shoots are ready to plant out, they grow with such a vigour so quickly, and you get such tasty fruit, and it's the second crop, and the plants are free. So this is, you can see why I do it, you know, everything's for free. So that's why I do that, and that's what I'll be doing with these plants. And I say I'm putting 8 in this box here, and I'm going to run a little test. I've spoke recently on videos about biodigestate, which is the waste product from biodigesters, where farmers are now got these big huge domed structures where they're putting wheat, rye and animal muck in there. It's all heating up like a good compost heap should do, and with that they're generating electricity which they sell back to the grid. At the end of it, there's a waste product which is essentially a peat-free compost. I've got 2 varieties. I've got one that's a bagged variety from a farm down in Somerset, who then make their own compost from that biodigestate, and I've got one that was gifted to me by a friend just around the corner from me, literally, and that's the raw product straight out of the biodigester. So 4 plants in each medium to see which powers forward. And the other thing I'm going to do, which I haven't brought it here, is I'm going to try some mycorrhizal fungi with the plants when I put them in. At the bottom of these 2 holes that I've already dug, I found the roots from a grapevine, and these plants can then connect to that root network. And we know this is still, a lot of this is hocus pocus, but mycorrhizal fungi spreads the world over, all through the soil, and it's essentially a mushroom. But what it allows plants to do is to tap into networks of other plants for nutrients and water in some cases. And I've even heard of cases, I don't know how true it is, where some trees actually help other trees by supplying them the nutrients when they're struggling. This is all just sort of documentary stuff that I've seen on the History Channel or whatever. But I've used it for a number of years with things like roses and bushes and trees, fruit trees that I've planted. Never used it on an annual plant before. I've never really bothered because it's in, grow, harvest, out and done. But I've got, again, from Audrey from Real Food Comes Dirty, she uses it with her tomato plants and she has good results. So I'm going to try it with all of my tomato plants this year and just see if overall I get a better vigour on the plants. So we'll crack on. Now, one more thing I forgot to mention in the previous little segments is my tomato plants were sown very early doors in tiny little quarter-sized seed trays on a propagator on my kitchen windowsill. They were then pricked out into modules, and from there, when they filled the cells, when the roots were coming out the bottom, they were then potted on into this size tray. So there was never too much soil around it, but enough for the plant to go into, and that's important so that the plant doesn't struggle with too much water in the pot. And it also stops the plants going spiralling round and round looking for somewhere else to go. When the roots were coming out to the bottom of this one, they were then potted on into this one. So you can see, again, not too much around it, but enough for it to carry on and encourage vigorous growth. Then I potted them on into this one, and again you can see not too much around, but that's where we are now. And with this plant, if I take that out, you can see the roots are coming out all the way around there. Not very much, they've not been in here very long, but the important thing is they're not spiraling, so they're not going to stay within that rootstock. They're going to get out and into the ground and spread out. I'm also going to plant them deeply up to the first first or second leaf. All these little fine hairs on the stem will turn into roots, and that will further power your plant and anchor it to the ground, especially if you're outside in windy conditions. So that's how I treat my plants. Keep them moving all the way through spring. Ultimate maintenance. And the final thing that I did, after them being on the windowsill, they went onto my heated propagator bench in my greenhouse that was set at about 25 degrees. And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they were taken off there and put onto a heat mat, which was set at about 16 degrees. For the last 4 or 5 days, they've just been sat on the greenhouse bench, so at normal temperatures, plus 1 or 2 degrees for being protected. But these haven't been hardened off at all. These are still sappy because they're still going to be undercover for the whole life. They're not going outdoors, apart from 2, which I'm going to start hardening off in the daytime. So that's why I've done that, is just to get the plants used to where they're going to be growing, get them up as best as I can without them spiraling around, so that the plants are the best that they can be. So I've got one in, and on this next one, I'm just going to put some of this Biodigestate Rocket Grow at the bottom of the hole, followed by some mycorrhizal. Take my plants. Now you can see the lovely root structure, but it's not wrapped all the way around the plants, which is good. We'll sprinkle some of that on the plants and get it in the hole. Now I'll just fill the hole around the plant with this stuff and get it staked and watered. So I have my 8 Crimson Crush plants planted in here. I'm going to put the front on in a minute after I've watered, and then put the lid on and then let them grow up now until they reach the roof, where I'll take the lid off, maybe leave this around on a bit longer, let them grow off, encourage them, give them that heat. It's still warm enough to encourage them to grow, but if it's a bit warmer, they'll grow much quicker and better for it. Now, what I've also done is I've sunk one of these pots in between each pair. So this pair, that pair, and then the 2 pairs over there. And what this does is it allows me to water down deep where the root zone of the plant is. What can happen when you plant your tomato plants, if you water them 2 or 3 times a week, which people generally do with tomatoes, all the wet can stay at the top. So where you've planted your tomatoes deep, and the roots should be getting away even deeper and spreading through the soil, the water source is at the top where you've watered. So the roots start to turn up and you don't get as well an anchored plant, and the roots don't stretch out as far. The roots seek the water, they sense that there's water there, and they'll go for that. So being able to water that deep into the soil, that wets that zone and keeps the roots down deep and allows them to spread out. This water will wick through these holes at the bottom into the soil underneath. I will still water on the surface as well, because these hairs on the roots of these plants, on the stems of these plants, will turn to roots, and actually by the end of the season you will see roots coming out of the stem of the tomato plant and into the soil. So that's where we are with those. Tied them in, they're staked. I've just closed them all up once I've watered, and yeah, we're good to go. And then next week I can get the next batch in just over here behind me. Right, so now that the Crimson Crush are off the greenhouse bench at home and planted, I can put 3 more varieties onto the greenhouse bench off the heat mat that a week ago were on the propagator. So they're being moved so that they get used to the temperatures in the polytunnel. So that's the next step. Put them on the greenhouse bench for 4 or 5 days, and then by then I should have harvested all this fennel, cleaned up this area, got another hot box in here, and I can plant them and protect them, and then we can move on to the 3rd stage of tomatoes. But for now, that's it. Please look after yourselves, everyone. Stay safe. I'll see you all very, very soon. Ta-ra now.